Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne, and this is episode 103. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button, and be sure to check us out at theloudest.com on the planet, KNAC.com. My guest for this episode is Gary Hughes. In addition to being a solo artist, he is also the frontman of the UK rock act TEN. TEN has a new album out called Something Wicked This Way Comes through Frontiers Music. It's the follow-up to his release Here Be Monsters in 2022. The albums had a short window from being released from one another, and we're going to find out why, along with a lot of other things. So here's vocalist Gary Hughes of TEN. If I knew absolutely nothing about TEN, how would you describe the band's music to me?
I would describe TEN as probably a product of basically all our upbringings. We're kind of steeped in the classic style of melodic rock music. Probably we're brought up with bands such as the Zeppelin, Deep Purple type of thing. Free, maybe that type of thing, Kossoff, that type of genre. We were all brought up with that, and essentially we began in the 90s, but really we were already 30 at that point. So maybe if we went back to our teens, if you like, we would be listening to bands like Purple and like Zeppelin, Rory Gallagher, things like that. So steeped in like a very sort of British class of classic rock music, but basically sort of forward thinking as well. One or two of the guys in the band have a sort of more proggy background, so that sometimes shows through. Our keyboard player in particular is a massive sort of Rush and Dream Theater fan, that type of thing. So we have a different blend of different sort of styles within the band, but I suppose our own style would be, I would describe it as essentially British, but obviously with influences from the classic style, so classic melodic rock music.
I'd say that's a fairly accurate assessment, especially on your latest album, Something Wicked Comes This Way. This is sort of a companion to your last album, but not really. You released Here Be Monsters about a year ago. Something Wicked This Way Comes is the latest in your album releases. Why I'm assuming you just wrote a lot during lockdown, but why the two separate releases?
Yeah, basically, you've hit the nail on the head there. We tried to maximize the time during lockdown. We were lucky that we had small home studios. So even though we were in as everybody was, in a situation where we couldn't spend longer than an hour outside of our homes, and we couldn't travel more than 2 kilometers away from our homes for exercise and various different things, we were able to still record. We were able to still sort of develop music from like small ideas. And the only thing we couldn't do really was to record drums. So I begun writing maybe 35, 36 songs for those two albums. And we whittled them down, and the guys added parts as we went along. And we finally made the cut to 20 songs that we felt would be an equal balance on each of the Here Be Monsters and the Something Wicked This Way Comes albums. So in a way, it was a shame because we left some songs out that we know weren't, was not because the songs weren't sort of strong. It was just that if there was another song on that album that was of the same ilk, or we didn't need another one of that type on that album, then we didn't add it. So we've done this kind of idea before, really. When we first started off, the first 10 album and then Name of the Rose were recorded in the same way. We recorded a batch of songs that was originally going to be a ballad album and a rockers album, and then we mixed them together, and it just became the first album, Name of the Rose. And we also did the same thing when we had a short stint on Rocktopia Records, when we did the Albion and Allied Worcester albums. So it kind of works for us. When we're in mode, we get a lot done. And I think that we maximized that time. Obviously, it was pretty much limbo period for most people, but we managed to come out with something at the end of the day that just simply needed drums add in and the little bit of extra production, which we did with Dennis Ward, and then we had two albums ready for stepped release, if you like.
And I think fans, at least older fans like me and the fans of the bands that you said influenced you, sort of like consistent music coming from an artist where, you know, there was a period there would be like almost 5 to 10 years between albums instead of shorter albums and more frequent. I think fans like to hear more frequent stuff.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, I was at the same time, I was brought up, you know, I remember the time when UFO would release an album every year, and the Scorpions would almost release an album every year, and I loved that. I loved the fact that there was a free flow of if you like, their material, and it seemed like it was an embryonic thing that was growing and growing. It was a great excuse at the time for seeing bands that toured regularly, that to be able to see them and see them develop and, you know, build up that kind of back catalogue. I just think that in a way, while the creative juices are flowing, it enables it to truck forward a little bit further. It would be difficult for us in a way without some kind of sort of disaster sort of befalling the band. It would be difficult for us to leave it 5 years or 6 years between albums. We kind of left between the Twilight Chronicles album and Storm Warning, we kind of left a 3, 4, maybe 4 year gap. But that was literally because we didn't know whether we were going to continue or not. And it was, you know, there were quite a few tragedies at the time in the band. So it would be hard for us to imagine now, though, a time when we wouldn't literally be making music. We all love doing it. Also, you get that sort of vibe that maybe, you know, maybe how long are you going to do it? You don't know. So while the labels are still saying to you, you know, make an album, we think, well, yeah, you know, until people stop asking us to make them, we might as well continue making them. And I think in a way, you staying true to your fan base, however large or small that is, you're still providing them with something new. There's something, a little beacon on the horizon for them every 12 months or every 18 months. You know, we enjoy that.
So far, you've released one single from the album, The Tidal Wave. If you want to talk a little bit about the meaning behind that song.
Yeah, it's a relationship song again. It's a kind of, you know, it's something we try and touch universal themes a lot of the time that a lot of people can relate to. And this in a way, it's Tidal Wave itself is sort of as a backdrop of a stormy idea that it could be a relationship. But in a way, we moved away from that, and it ended up being a very descriptive, if you like, almost like a poem written about under the sea. And basically the relationships between the sort of correlations, forgive the pun, of various things below the water in comparison to what would be happening above the water with the sort of tumultuous, wave mass above the water. So the idea that everything above the surface is chaos, whereas everything under the water is still sometimes all calm. There's a sort of hidden thing going on in there. But yeah, it's a difficult one to make a video for because it's so descriptive and because it reads so much like a poem. It was, well, what do? We can't really have a narrative to this one. All we can do is, so we set ourselves up on a big stage with some sort of, you know, LED screens and cast various oceanic footage on the screen behind us, and that's what we ended up with. But yeah, I like the song itself because it has quite an upbeat vibe, and you know, and it has for a song of that ilk, it has quite a light feel to it, you know. So which is, I suppose, in lots of ways is a rarity for us because a lot of the things we do are sort of melancholic. So yeah, we enjoyed making that one and the video too.
As a whole, do you like making music videos? Because I didn't see a lot of music videos out there for 10, the last few albums.
No, I think we went through a period where we didn't feel that we were, I don't know, when we talked about the videos that we like, we never in a position where we have a massive budget for a video. So you're always in a situation where you're looking at, well, you know, we have, I don't know, this X amount to be able to spend on this video. Sometimes Frontiers or the labels will say to you, you have this and that's it. And you think to yourself, well, you put so much into the music that and you make it as sort of polished and as sort of completist as you possibly can. And then you think, well, how the hell do we make a video for this without it costing us, you know, $100,000 or whatever? We always shy away a little bit and think, well, you know, should we do a video? Should we not? Should we just do a lyric video for this? Should we do? So we're in that kind of catch-22 situation. I think a lot of bands of our sort of stature, if you like, we're not in a position where we can spend thousands of dollars on videos, and so we have to tailor our cloth accordingly. It's a sad thing, really, because a lot of the songs on our records, even in the past, on past records, we thought, oh, can you imagine if we had the money to be able to really do that justice or that justice? And you always find yourself in a compromised situation. So sometimes if we can't make the video the way we would like, we don't make one at all. You know, they've got us into a situation now where they say, well, look, we can't put an album out without it being a video. So we, we always bow to it and we always make one. But at the same time, one of the gaps in our, if you like, in our anthology is probably a live DVD. And I think that, that would be more attractive to us than anything really, because that would give the fans something that they could see, not just one track. They could see almost a potted history of the band within an hour and 45 minutes of live music. So something like that would be attractive to us, but sometimes we're a little bit unsure about the video situation. But hey ho, we're living in a video world, so we have to make one.
Indeed. Another song I enjoyed from the album, Parabellum. This one's about kind of the propaganda that we're fed on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And of course, it was quite poignant. It hit at a time, really, when the Russians and the Ukrainians were sort of going at it. And it's a bizarre thing, really, because when it just struck me at the time that the lessons, we sometimes don't learn from history, for things to be reoccurring the way they do in various forms. And I just thought, well, that we had this song on the slab, and I thought, well, this could be, we could make this a War Machine song, really, but like say a propaganda War Machine, and of course it was nice to be able to montage some of the great speeches from from previous world wars, if you like. That was to be able to set it off, but to give that kind of little nod back to, well, here we are, with this montage of people like Churchill and Chamberlain and people like that, and yet still we're not learning, and still these atrocities are happening. So it was just we're not normally a band that would get on a soapbox, and we don't mean Parabellum to be one either, but it was just the whole world was going through it, and it just seemed like we would make one song a bit of a statement and then move away from that. Yeah.
Is there another song on the album that you're planning to release as a single, if it will?
I think that what we did this time is normally we have a bit of an input into what we release, and unfortunately, as I say, we only make one video. Our deal says that we only make one video per album at the moment. So I think the songs that were picked, obviously they went with Tidal Wave for the video. They've just released Look for the Rose, I think, as a soundtrack, an MP3 from the album. And I think the third one that the label shows was The Only Way Out. It's a strange one, really, because I think on the album there are more immediate tracks than those, if you like, probably more commercial tracks from a radio perspective, from a single perspective. But, at the end of the day, it's sometimes better to let the label choose, and then they sort of live or die by their own swords, and also at the same time then they're happy that they're dealing with the songs that they wanted to promote. So yeah, I think the ones to come are sort of imminently, if not already out, is Look for the Rose, and The Only Way Out is be the third offering, I think.
You mentioned that Dennis Ward did the mixing and mastering. He's been working with you guys since 2011. He's almost like the sixth member of the band at this point, right?
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's an absolute consummate professional, really. And he gets us now. It's a weird thing, but I mean, maybe it's something that takes time, but he instantly gets it. When we send him, I always send him a rough of the tracks before we finish the actual instrumentation on them, so that he's kind of already getting in the zone a little bit inside his own head. Then by the time we've thrown the kitchen sink at it, usually we've put too much on there, And I found that really early on that you get too close to the songs to be able to mix them once you've recorded them. And he's really brutal sometimes with the stuff. We send it off and he's kind of, well, we need that, but we don't need that, and we don't need that. We really give him complete a blank canvas with it, carte blanche with it. And he does get rid of some parts that you think, God, I spent hours doing that, But then again, when you listen to it back and when you go a few months down the line, you listen to the mix, you think, yeah, removing that just added so much more clarity. And he's a really cool guy. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to interview him or speak to him, but he's a really cool guy. He's an American living in Germany, mixing out of Germany, out of Karlsdorf, Utah. And he's just a really nice guy. Nothing's ever too much trouble. And in fact, this time he was very instrumental because, as I said, when we were recording in the small studios, none of us had room to record drums. So it was a bit back to front really this time, because we normally like the drums down there first and then we're laying the instruments on top. This time we laid the drums on last, and we were saying, well, our drummer at the time just had a new baby boy. So he said, now's the time for me to step off, because I'm more concerned, about spending quality time with my family, which we totally get. So at that point, we didn't want to delay the delivery of the album. So I said to Dennis, you have session guys coming in and out. Who do you reckon? And he instantly recommended Marcus Coleman, who he'd worked with many times before. And he said, this guy can come in. He said, I'll record him. We'll have these knocked off in a week. No problem, both records. And that's what happened. But that sort of came from Dennis as well. That was a definite lead with Dennis. And of course, if he's suggesting it, then you can trust it. So we went with that, and there we go. So he helps us out yet again from a bit of a tough corner, really. So, but yeah, and it's one of those things, working with Dennis is it's a strange thing, because people always say, oh, you've never tried different other producers and this, that, and the other. But there's a certain comfort zone with working with somebody that knows your music and appreciates how you feel and what the essences of the band are. But also, I'm a big believer in the phrase, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Why fix it? So, it certainly isn't broken, and we're enjoying the fact that we've worked together for so long, and we have a great relationship on that basis. So, why not continue?
Does TEN have any festival appearances scheduled for 2023, or any tours, at least in your area?
Yeah, we do. We have a festival called Heat Festival planned in April. It was, funnily enough, it was supposed to be the first week of December of 22, but it was moved because I think they were Germany was going back into a kind of almost not so much a second wave of COVID, but the government were putting out warnings that any sort of large gatherings, could they be rescheduled to the warmer months, really? So that they was trying to sort of limit the amount of spread. And it wasn't the only festival I know to be moved from December. So they asked us if we were still available in April. Of course we were. So I think April 15 and 16 is the weekend that the Heat Festival is going to be on. I believe we're on the Sunday, which is the 16th. So we're looking forward to that. We have a couple of shows that are just in process of being organised, but I can tell you about them anyway. We have one for Athens that's being organised for, I think, May or June, and we're hoping to chain onto that another Stockholm visit, because we did Vasby a couple of years ago, and we're hoping to do Stockholm again, and then into Germany for some more shows there. So, hopefully as many shows as we can get. I think, quite a lot of bands are really chomping at the bit now to play live. And I know there was a sort of a foray of bands that toured last year, and it seems to be all up and running again now. So, so we want to get on that bandwagon and get as much live work under our belts as we can.
I know these days it's tough for bands overseas to get over to the U.S., but have you ever brought the band to the U.S.?
I haven't, and I would love to bring us to the US. I've only ever come on holiday to the US, but I'd love to play over there. And I think it's one of those things, really. You can't really say you've done it till you've crossed the pond. I don't care at what level, whether it was a festival somewhere or whether it was a couple of standalone shows. it'd be just lovely to bring the band over. But we have to have goals, we have to have dreams, and maybe that'll be something that we do down the line one day. Maybe in some kind of a multi-band bill type of thing. Something like that would be great. But of other bands that maybe haven't appeared in the States as well, that'd be, it might be a good ticket. But we shall see. But I think, like you say, cost isn't always, as you say, not prohibitive as such, but it does make it difficult to come over.
Something Wicked This Way Comes is released through Frontiers Music, and they announced in 2016 that you would return to the label, but I feel like you've been with the label for a very long time to begin with. Their first release was a 10 album.
Yes, indeed. We started, well, our first Frontiers' first 001 was a 10 record, and they seem to have grown from there. It's a funny thing because they always distributed, when we began on Now and Then Records, they were distributing us in certain areas of Europe. We had another label called MTM that were dealing with Germany, one or two other territories, and we had a company in Japan called Zero Corporation, which were part of EMI, that were distributing us there. And it was a funny thing. Now and Then went to the wall, and basically they offloaded us, or if you like, or they passed us on to Frontiers, which made sense to us because Frontiers were distributing us anyway at that point. So we moved on to Frontiers, and we've been with Frontiers since the end of the 90s really. So it just made sense. I mean, there was a period of time where we sort of left for a short period just for the album and Alvin Werter albums, and I think we were in a situation where maybe, I don't know, familiarity bred a little bit of contempt, and we didn't feel that we were getting a fair crack of the whip really at that point. And I think the little break probably did both sides good. I mean, maybe it wasn't all about Frontiers. Maybe we were getting a little bit sort of, a little bit focused too much on certain aspects of our music and what we wanted to do, that we weren't really listening to the label either at that point. So, which I would admit. So, a little bit of clarity, a couple of years down the line, then we were able to rejoin Frontiers. Ironically, the CEO of Rocktopia Records, Bruce Mee, he was the one that actually suggested to Serafino Frontiers that we re-sign, because he was in a situation where he wasn't going to continue beyond he wasn't going to continue the label beyond the Aladdin Werter album, and he's just approached Frontiers, not so much on our behalf, but just said, I'm quite sure they'd be conducive to talking to you again, should you approach, which he did, and then we're back on Frontiers. Sort of another four or five albums down the line, and we, as you say, it feels like we've never gone anywhere. But I don't know, sometimes a reality check for both sides is a good thing, and then everybody gets back to what's important, which is making the music that you love making and getting it out to as many people as you can.
You also release your solo material through Frontiers Music. You released Waterslide in 2021 and a best of collection called Decades. Do you see much of a difference between the stuff you do with 10 and then the stuff you do on your own?
I see there being quite a difference. I know some people would argue that, I think because the songwriting is of a certain sort of flavor, I think they see it as very similar. But it's a funny thing, because occasionally in writing the batches of songs for 10, occasionally I come up with four or five songs that I think, oh no, that's not going to cut muster with 10. It's going to be more akin to somebody else. Or, you think maybe if I was writing songs for other artists, that would be suitable for them or whatever. And they tend to just get archived on. I have these kind of small little MP3 handheld recorders that I stack ideas onto. And it's one of those things that every time I get a gap and I get an opportunity to make a solo record, I trawl through these ideas and usually come up with some kind of eclectic collection of songs that wouldn't quite have sat right on a 10 record, but seem to sit well together as a group. So yeah, that's what I tend to do. But I mean, you can tell that there's usually there's 5 or 6 years sometimes between solo records, because obviously the 10 catalog and continuing with 10 is always the priority. But it's nice that I have that extra little sort of outlet to be able to release some of those onto the market as well.
Have you thought about working on another rock opera? Your previous one was Once a Future King in 2003, and it seemed to get a pretty good response.
Yeah, I'd love to. I do have 2 ideas that, 2 sort of original storyline ideas, totally different as well. Not historical in the way that the Arthur albums are, obviously. But yeah, I'd love to do them. When I look back at the Once a Future King albums, I think I still really like those albums. But I think where I went wrong and what I should have done originally from the offset is I should have sort of tied the guys who were in the cast, if you like, into like a more sort of elongated arrangement where, you know, they were crying out really to be performed as maybe some kind of sort of rock theatre almost, you know, a rock opera style thing, maybe even part 1 and 2 with a small intermission or something, but with the original cast. And if I'd have thought about that, if I'd probably had a more business brain on me, I would probably have thought about doing a live performance DVD, maybe a double live record of it or whatever. You know, there were avenues that we could have explored to be able to maximize the potential of those ideas. And I think if I ever did another one, I'd definitely do it in that way. Be careful about the cast that I pulled together. Try and make it quite diverse, but also, you know, make sure that there was a plan beyond just the albums, you know, that people were going to see it maybe performed live. Because the amount of times I get asked, you know, oh, you know, why was that never performed live? Why did you never this? You know, so if I'd have thought it through a little bit more, I'd have done that. And I think if I ever did another one, which I would love to do because it's a dream to write for other people's voices, and then I would do something like that and make it a little bit more performable, a little bit more of a, you know, more than just the albums.
A lot of critics and fans point to the 10 album Spellbound from 1999 as one of your landmark releases. You're coming up on the 25th anniversary of that particular album. Do you think there was something special that people connected to on that album that kind of makes it seen as that landmark record?
I think that it was probably because it was probably partly obviously the material on there. It will have had something to do with that, but I think also because we'd done the first 3 albums and we'd done those on Now and Then, and they'd been on Zero Corporation. When we went in to do Spellbound, that was when we were actually, Zero Corporation folded in Japan and we were bought by Universal. So we ended up on, I think people, well, even we thought, you know, oh, major label time, you know, major label coming forward, and you think this is going to be a different step up. Found ourselves in a studio there with Rafe McKenna, who was had come off the back of different things, giant albums, amongst others, various different things. You know, we thought, you know, this is going to be different. It was definitely sounded harder, you know, a bit of a harder album for us, but managed to keep the melodic aspects of that there. And it was sort of more anthemic in lots of ways, Spellbound album. And I suppose in a way, because beyond that, we didn't deviate so much as we shifted labels after that album. We went to JVC and then we moved again, you know, onto Marquee, Avalon. And before we knew it, the music kind of moved with us. And I think for a lot of people, we hit a peak there, an early peak there, a 4th album in. Hopefully, people will have found other things since then, given that we're so many albums in now. But I think for that time, I think I would probably say if we were ever going to do the big sort of Def Leppard Whitesnake thing, it would have been around about that time, more so than the than the period that followed. And I think as well, people forget that you know, we're in a situation where we managed to sort of persevere through a time that wasn't really very bands of our ilk weren't really sort of in vogue at that time. We were sort of post grunge and everything, so we kind of were suffering from that a bit, and lots of bands. That's one of the things we're proud about. We're still around after all this time, even though it hasn't been the easiest time for bands like us to stay alive, if you like. And lots of bands have gone by the wayside, but the good bands that we've known along the way. So we're quite proud of that as well, that we've managed to endure during a time when it wasn't the 80s, it wasn't the glam days, So I suppose that's another sort of thing that we put another feather in our cap for that. But maybe that's part of why people see Spellbound as such a strong album for us, because of as much further time. The time it was in sort of our career as the music on there.
Do you think that there is an album in your catalog that followed Spellbound that people should maybe take a second listen to because you think it's probably one of your more special releases?
I would say, I would say the album when we came back from the hiatus, from the sort of 3 or 4 years, Spellbound, that is an album that is worth a second listen, but also possibly Heresy and Creed. Heresy and Creed had that big opening, the Arabian Nights opening and everything. I would say stylization wise that probably is more of a Spellbound ilk than any of the albums that followed or before. So I would say possibly, as a side one, Spellbound, but possibly as a side one, Storm Warning, but definitely Heresy and Creed. Give Heresy and Creed a listen.
Do you still work producing other artists, or do you just strictly do your own material at this juncture?
Well, at this stage, I just do my own material, really. It's one of those things. It's a situation where it's a time thing as much as anything else. And plus the fact, to be quite honest with you, I've not been asked for a while to do that. So being totally honest about it, as I said, I love working and writing with other people, with other bands, and writing for other voices as well. It's something I hope I get opportunity to do again, in the future. But I never say no to anything like that. I'm always open to conversations and dialogues on things like that. But I haven't been asked for a while, so maybe I will get asked soon. Who knows?
Even though Something Wicked This Way Comes was just released, I would imagine a guy that's released 3 albums in the last 1.5 to 2 years probably already has the next album in the works.
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, it's one of those situations. I think when you're a writer, it's a bit like a curse. You're constantly on the go. And as I say, these little MP3 machines that I have, they're a great tool as far as archiving material is concerned, but they're also a pain, because at the end of the day, I can get an idea. One can wake me up in the middle of the night, or I can go to the bathroom, or whatever. And because these things are so portable, you find yourself, there putting your ideas down at crazy o'clock in the morning. So I do have a lot of a constant stream of ideas. So I'd be telling lies if I said I hadn't already begun work on the next one. But I have, and the show must go on, I suppose. In a way.
Well, those are all the questions I have for you today, Gary. The new 10 album, Something Wicked This Way Comes, is out now on Frontiers Music. Another great album by 10. I look forward to your future work, and I look forward into delving a lot into the past. I've heard many albums, but I don't think I've hit them all.
Oh, well, fair enough. Well, please let me know what you think when you do get around to them. It's been great to spend time with you, George, and it's been great. Thank you very much for your time as well. I know that it takes time out of your schedule to do these things, and you do them essentially, I suppose, as a labor of love. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me.
Once again, I want to thank Gary Hughes of 10 for coming on the Rock is George podcast. Be sure to check out 10's latest album, Something Wicked This Way Comes, out now through Frontiers Music. Head over to your favorite music streaming app. Check out the new album. If you like what you hear, buy a physical copy, support the artist. For all things 10, head over to their website, 10official.com. I also want to thank Dustin Hardman of Hardman Promotions and Frontiers Music for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. I'll see you again soon.